It was a great weekend for some teams, but certainly not for others. Where are you going to lead us on your first crack?
No, we have to start with Port Adelaide and what's happening at Alberton Oval and the pressure that's on Ken Hinkley, because they were the biggest disappointment of the weekend. And it's fair what's going to come their way, because you can't lose by 79 points at home when you're expected to be a contender. You can't lose 3 on the trot by an average of 45 points, and have lost your last 3 games at home. And really, it should have been 4, if not for them getting out of jail against the Hawks in that come-from-behind win. When you go chips in with recruits and you say you want to improve and you think you can go to the next level, where you've got to the point where you've given up your first-round draft pick coming into the draft at the end of the year, you can understand why the fans are getting disgruntled, because it's a concern, it's a big issue now. And I suppose that the question is, where does the blame lie? And that's where it's got to at the moment. Where are the fingers being pointed? And it was really interesting to hear Ken Hinkley post-game, what he had to say. But then we want to take you back to what he said leading up to round 1.
We're optimistic and we're hopeful that we've improved enough that it'll put us right at the top of the ladder, and that's where we set out at the start of the year to try and be. I've said before, we've got a really strong list, our best list that we've had in a good period of time, and we've looked to have improved that from the people that we've brought in, but we've still got to see that in action. I've said this a few times. We're not one of the best teams in the comp. We sit below that. Everyone agrees. We have to keep working to change what our results have been to make sure they turn around and become what we need them to be.
So that is interesting, hearing the message, because clearly from what Ken Hinkley was saying at the start of the year, it's not the list that's a problem. He thinks he's got a terrific list that should have improved on where they were last year. So that leaves the big question: if it's not the list, what is it? Why are they having the issues they're having this year? And it can only be 2 things. If it's not your playing list, it's either your system and your game plan, or you're not maximising the talent that you have on the list. And that, unfortunately, lies fairly and squarely on the coach. So it's understandable why there is a lot of noise coming his way. And there is a sense of, I suppose, doom and gloom, and in some ways a bit of a sense of inevitability about what might come with Ken Hinkley. So no doubt this next 4-week period is the most important 4 weeks of his coaching career. I think he's coached 275 games. We know he's been through so much. He's pretty stoic in his position, and he understands where it's at. But there is plenty riding on the line for Ken Hinkley now, because they're only 1 slip up away. And if that does happen, there is no doubt that Ken Hinkley's future is hanging by a thread, and that's because of the situation the team have put him and the football club in. It's unacceptable. The fans have been sensing it, it feels like, for a while, and we know Kingy has been big on it, that again, and they even admitted it, they can't beat the top teams, they can't beat the teams.
So that's where the narrative has changed, hasn't it? Between those 2 grabs, at the start of the year, they thought they'd made the changes. They went all in to fix their backline and their ruckwork issues, and they were confident that was going to close the gap, but gradually that's changed to the point where now he's basically saying we're not there.
Yeah, and when you look at the list, I went through it before, there's maybe a handful of players you can say clearly have improved on last year, some that have stayed at a high level, Zach Butters and Dan Houston being a couple, but maybe a handful have improved. And when you look at their list profile, in 2022 they were strong defensively and their clearance and contest game was terrific. Their offence struggled. Last year their offence was pretty good, but they struggled defensively and in their contest game. And now, as this season's going on, it's dwindling their profile by the week. So that hasn't improved. Their list hasn't improved, and that's why they're in the situation they're in.
And as it stands, they'll have pick 34, 35.
That's their first pick.
Will be their first pick at next year's draft. So it's going to be interesting to see if what Ken changes, if anything.
And that's the big question. And when you think about it, I mean, he's pretty wedded to his style of footy, the front half game, lock it in. It does leave the defence vulnerable. We'll show some vision later on. And really, personnel-wise, there's not a lot he can do. He's just got to try and maximise the talent that they already have there to get them to play at their best. Because if they don't, as we touched on, it's looking pretty inevitable how it's going to end.
But that's what you do when you try and win premierships. You try and fill the gaps. So they went recruiting, and like you said,
and that's fair.
100%.
Had to do it.
And that's why, you go after the pro scouting, as you know, Joey. So you look at it, March 15, he said, right, I got what I want. Now I've got to try and win it, and he's not going to win it. So he's obviously backtracking. But when your supporters turn on you like that, it's a fair sign.
Well, the team, as we've already said, that aren't playing their best footy is Port Adelaide, but the complete opposite for the Brisbane Lions. It's hard to believe that they're still not in the 8. They were there briefly over the weekend. As I said at the top of the show, it's the first time they've had more wins than losses. They've obviously had a draw as well, and it really seems inevitable now, if they just keep going like they are, that they'll play finals footy. They put the 12 goals together at one stage. We know how disappointing day it was for Port when they were celebrating 20 years since their flag. But from a Brisbane point of view, so many options up forward, which we've already known, but now they're starting to function.
Yeah, well, Chris Fagan's been banging on. Our numbers aren't that bad. There's a lot of green on this board. And Joey, when you hear that from a coach, you sort of go, well, what's wrong? And I've been following their forwards for the last 3 weeks. See Danaher up the ruck, spent 20% in the ruck. But you look at Eric Hipwood, the too tall timber. Once he's engaged, you can see him here with Ratugolea. He goes on the lead. He's going to the pocket, to the boundary line. But look at the other forwards and look at the isolation and look at the Port Adelaide defence. No chance. And that's what Brisbane do really, really well. So these two, they're like a couple of magnets normally. But even when they do come together, they don't crash into each other. So they've got to present. They're keeping themselves nice and wide. And the beauty about this one, obviously the mindset is engage Aliir. Sacrifice your game. Eric Hipwood would normally, 6 weeks ago, turn back, come into Joe's space, open the lanes up. So Aliir's in halfway land here at the moment. Joe gets the leading lane and away you go. The synergy right now is really, really healthy with Brisbane where they're at. So the green side of things, I see where Fags is going and now it's starting to click with their forwards.
What about their big ruckman? The big O, he had 3 goals straight before yesterday and he kicked another 3 goals straight for the season. It's great when they can push forward. But with the way the ruck rules changed, he is the sort of ruckman that a lot of rucks don't want to come up against, I don't reckon.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's dominant when he plays at his absolute best, Big O. We've seen that a number of times. And he's going to be influential on the run home for the Brisbane Lions. We take a look at, as you said, the 3 goals. But he was able to dominate in there and really set it up for the Brisbane Lions. There's no surprise they were able to dominate clearance and outscored them by 55 points from there. And I loved his presence. I mean, we spoke about him, the best player on the ground. And if he wasn't, he was setting up Lachie Neale. But look at him just ragdoll Jordan Sweet from that forward 50 stoppage. The big fella loved it. He was able to present down the line as well. And this was probably to the point where, Sweet thought, I can't keep up with him because he's also got a good tank on him, big Oscar McInerney. And it's a bit of a telltale sign when you want to man the mark and you want to say, yep, I'm happy to stand here, let someone else take care of the big fella. And it was great to be able to identify. And you talked, Dicko, about the Brisbane forward line. Look at Charlie Cameron. He knows, he sees it. Hey, kick it to the big fella, get it in there, stays out of his way and lets him get to work. So I really liked it. But again, it highlighted, and we spoke earlier about Port Adelaide, what the recruits have done. So they chose to drop Ivan Soldo for Jordan Sweet, and Sweet was completely outclassed. So when you take a look at the recruits they've bought, these are their play ratings for this season. So have they really been able to do what they thought they would at the start of the year? Radigali has been okay. I'm not sure if he's been as good as what they hoped he would be. Zerk Thatcher got subbed out of this game, and we just touched on the other two. So that's been a big reason why I don't think they've improved like they thought they would. All
right, so the Port midfield and our lab analysis with thanks to Xero online accounting to make you do business better. Because so much relies, and you could on their midfield, and you could see the 3 young guns at times, particularly earlier, they're shouldering such a big load. What did you see about the way they play?
Yeah, but this is where it's damning because the whole competition knows when you play Port Adelaide, if you can win clearance and contest and surge the ball your way, you're going to get great looks because they are a team that surge and want to go their way. And when they get on their terms, we know how dangerous they are. But these are just some examples of these mids and their work rate from stoppage and why, as we touched on, Brisbane were able to smack them and get such good looks. So there's Berry and Neale leaving that stoppage, and there are the 3 that were at that boundary throw-in. The 3 leaders too, Rosie, Butters and Wines, just lagging behind, not even really chasing. And this is all second quarter stuff. I haven't got vision from the fourth quarter. The game was well and truly over. And if you strip the ball and you can win contest against Port Adelaide, how often do you catch them offside and you can get out goal side on them? Now, Brisbane do have a little bit of a tendency themselves to get forward of the ball. So it is sometimes ships in the night, but because they're able to get their hands dirty, win contest and win clearance, they're able to do this so easily against Port Adelaide. And this is the most damning aspect of Port Adelaide's game. So I've been critical of Port Adelaide's defence, and rightly so. But in this game, it was almost hard to be too critical of the defenders because of the way that these mids were chasing from these contests. So there's Zach Butters again, and their numbers look pretty good, and they work really hard on offence. The midfielders, Rosie and Butters and Wines and some of their halfbacks, but when they really need to dig in and chase and help their defenders, they get beaten far too often, and we've seen it, and that's why they don't beat the top teams.
The other thing that I thought, calling the game was noticeable, just the spirit of Brisbane. I know it's easy when you're winning to be happy, but right from the start, they were celebrating each other's great performances, and it was a big day for 200 games, of course, for Harris Andrews, but nonetheless...
Their mojo's back.
It's back. It's back, and so you're not going to want to play against Brisbane.
They can smell it. They can smell final. So it might have started the season slow, and Collingwood did too. Now Collingwood sit 3rd on the ladder. So right as we speak now, they're well on the hunt.
All right, still plenty to come on the first crack. I might even...